Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business, published in 1985, is a foundational work of media theory and cultural criticism. Postman argues that television as a medium fundamentally alters the way societies engage with public discourse, reducing serious topics, such as politics, education, and religion, into entertainment. While the book emerged during the Reagan era and the rise of cable television, its critique remains startlingly relevant in today's age of social media, memes, and streaming platforms. Postman begins his work with a striking juxtaposition of George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. While Orwell feared a future dominated by oppressive control and censorship, Huxley envisioned a society enslaved by its own indulgence in pleasure and triviality. Postman sides with Huxley, arguing that modern society is more likely to be destroyed by its addiction to amusement than by governmental tyranny. In essence, we are not being oppressed by what we hate, but by what we love. The medium is the metaphor. Postman's central thesis is that every medium of communication embeds its own epistemological bias. That is, it determines the kinds of ideas that can be expressed through it. For example, typography, writing in print, encourages logic, rationality, and sequential thought, making it suitable for conveying complex ideas, arguments, and philosophies. Television, by contrast, is an image-driven visual medium that favors emotion, brevity, and entertainment. Television, therefore, is not merely a neutral channel through which content passes. It changes the nature of content itself. A televised debate is no longer about argumentation, but about charisma and stage presence. News becomes a series of dramatic, attention-grabbing snippets rather than in-depth reporting or contextual analysis. In Postman's words, the medium becomes the metaphor through which a culture thinks. When the dominant medium is television, then entertainment becomes the metaphor for all forms of public discourse. In earlier centuries, particularly in 18th and 19th century America, public life was dominated by a typographic mind. This era was characterized by an intense engagement with written language. Speeches, debates, and even sermons were long, complex, and intellectually demanding, and yet they were popular and widely consumed. Postman uses Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas's debates as examples, hours-long, rhetorically complex events that drew large crowds. Print culture demanded concentration and critical thinking. Reading was not passive, it was an active engagement. Literacy rates in 19th century America were remarkably high, and the written word held authority and seriousness. This print-based culture encouraged citizens to analyze, compare, and evaluate. According to Postman, such a culture was inherently suited to rational public discourse and democratic engagement. The decline of the age of typography. With the advent of the telegraph in the mid-19th century, Postman argues, information began to lose its contextual grounding. Suddenly, news could be transmitted instantly across great distances, and a flood of disjointed facts began to pour in, unconnected to local relevance or personal action. He calls this information without context, where facts exist for their own sake and not because they help solve problems or make decisions. Photography soon followed, giving primacy to the image over the word. These technological innovations shifted the cultural focus from content to sensation. By the time radio and television arrived, the image had become dominant and entertainment had replaced exposition as the primary mode of communication. Television, according to Postman, is not evil in itself, but it is poorly suited for conveying complex ideas. Its format rewards visual spectacle, emotional appeals, and simplified messages. As a result, everything that appears on television must be entertaining to survive. This imperative applies even to news, politics, religion, and education. Postman devotes an entire chapter to news broadcasting. He critiques the format of programs like CBS Evening News or NBC Nightly News, which present serious, sometimes tragic, global events with cheerful music, flashy graphics, and smiling anchors. The result is what Postman calls a now-this culture, where stories are delivered in rapid succession with no logical connection or emotional continuity. Viewers are not encouraged to think critically or to act, but merely to be amused. This trivialization extends to politics. Presidential debates become more about appearance and likability than policy or substance. Politicians are evaluated based on how they perform on camera, not on their ideas or records. Television advertising, a central element in campaigns, reduces complex political ideologies to catchy slogans or 30-second attacks. Education and religion in the age of television. Postman also examines how television transforms other institutions. In education, the rise of edutainment blurs the lines between learning and fun. Shows like Sesame Street, which Postman acknowledges as well-meaning, introduce children to learning as an entertaining activity, which he believes may diminish their tolerance for the slower, more rigorous demands of real classroom learning. Students may begin to expect entertainment from education rather than discipline and effort. Religion, too, is affected. Televangelism becomes a spectacle rather than a sacred or contemplative experience. Postman compares traditional church services, marked by solemnity, reflection, and community, to televangelist performances designed for mass appeal. With dramatic music, scripted emotions, and commercial breaks, faith becomes just another form of entertainment. Huxleyan warning, Postmornings is fundamentally Huxleyan. He believes that modern society is becoming infantilized, addicted to pleasure, and indifferent to truth. Unlike Orwell's vision where truth is suppressed, in Postman's world, truth is drowned in a sea of irrelevance. People are not being forced to accept lies. They are simply too distracted and entertained to care about truth. This leads to what Postman calls the peekaboo culture. Information pops up, demands attention for a moment, then vanishes. There is no coherence, no depth, and no sustained thought. It is difficult for democracy to function in such a context because meaningful public discourse becomes nearly impossible. Relevance in the digital age. Although written in 1985, Amusing Ourselves to Death feels prescient today. Television's logic has been extended and intensified by the internet and social media. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube reduce even further the time and complexity that can be devoted to any topic. Memes, hashtags, and influencers have become the dominant voices of public culture. Postman's concept of the medium shaping the message is echoed in today's algorithmic logic, where the platforms promote content based on engagement and watch time rather than value or truth. Clickbait headlines, viral outrage, and superficial aesthetics dominate discourse. Politics has become even more performative, education increasingly gamified, and news often indistinguishable from entertainment. Conclusion. Amusing Ourselves to Death is not a nostalgic lament for a lost golden age, but a serious and sustained critique of how technological mediums shape the way societies think, speak, and govern. Postman doesn't call for banning television or returning to pre-modern times. Rather, he urges readers to become aware of the epistemological bias of the media they consume. In essence, Postman is not just critiquing television, but offering a call to cultural self-awareness. He wants us to recognize that the way we communicate determines the way we think, and by extension, the kind of society we create. As digital technologies continue to transform public discourse, Postman's insights challenge us to ask, are we amusing ourselves to death?